They were America's favorite odd couple brothers. One a smooth-talking playboy, the other a down-on-his-luck divorce. Together, Charlie Sheen and Jon Cryer turned 2.5 Men into the most-watched comedy on television. But off-screen, their bond didn't just fade, it shattered. And more than a decade later, the silence between them is louder than ever. Why can't these two Hollywood veterans, once inseparable on set, find their way back to even a simple conversation? At the height of television's golden sitcom era, Charlie Sheen was untouchable, pulling in a staggering $1.8 million per episode. He wasn't just the star of 2.5 Men, he was the face of CBS primetime. Week after week, millions tuned in to watch Sheen's life, then life bachelor antics bounce off Jon Cryer's neurotic, down-on-his-luck Alan Harper. On screen, their chemistry felt effortless, like two brothers who had been sparring 4 years, and that's what made the show explode into a cultural phenomenon. But behind those laugh tracks, the pressure was immense. Sheen's charisma carried the show. Yet the very lifestyle that made him so magnetic was already starting to crack the foundation. Still in those early years, the success was undeniable. The cast ran in awards, the network cashed in billions, and Sheen, at least in public, looked like he was living every man's fantasy. And then the fantasy began to slip. By 2011, the cracks in Charlie Sheen's empire weren't just showing. They were exploding across every tabloid in the country. The man who had once been Hollywood's highest-paid actor was suddenly better known for wild nights, unpredictable interviews, and his now infamous tiger blood catchphrase. The headlines were relentless. Public meltdowns, bitterance, and a war of words with the very man who had built 2.5 Men around him, creator Chuck Lorre. Production came to a screeching halt. Warner Brothers and CBS had no choice but to shut down filming as Sheen's behavior spiraled out of control. What had once been TV's most reliable money-making machine turned into a legal and PR nightmare, and then came the final blow. Sheen's contract ripped up. His character written off and his Hollywood banishment sealed. But in the middle of all the chaos, one man quietly shouldered the fallout. Jon Cryer. His entire career, his reputation, even his family life suddenly tangled in Sheen's self-destruction. For Cryer, it wasn't just a co-star imploding. It was watching the show they had built together collapse right on top of him. For Jon Cryer, the implosion wasn't just a headline. It was personal. He had built nearly a decade of his career alongside Sheen, standing by his side as the quirky, unlucky-in-love Alan Harper, while Charlie played the carefree brother. When Sheen went off the rails, Cryer wasn't just losing a co-star. He was losing the stability of the show that he had defined him. In later interviews, Cryer admitted the bitterness never fully went away. The sitcom didn't end on its own terms. It collapsed under the weight of Sheen's chaos. And while Ashton Kutcher stepped in as the replacement lead, audiences never embraced the new dynamic the same way. Ratings dipped, critics pounced, and the once unstoppable machine limped along until its final cancellation in 2014. For Cryer, it meant carrying the responsibility of a broken show, all while dealing with the fallout in his personal life. He's spoken about how Sheen's spiral didn't just affect cast and crew. It bled into his own family, his own sense of stability. To him, the damage wasn't just professional. It was something that cut much deeper. More than a decade later, Charlie Sheen is trying something Hollywood never expected: owning the chaos. With his memoir, The Book of Sheen, set to hit shelves, and a 2-part Netflix documentary titled AKA Charlie Sheen about to stream, the former bad boy is stepping back into the spotlight. This time, instead of ducking the past, he's putting it all out there. Every scandal, every feud, every high, and every crash. And in one of the documentary's biggest surprises, Jon Cryer appears. After years of silence, the man who once played Sheen's on-screen brother shares his own perspective, reflecting honestly and even compassionately on the roller coaster years they endured together. For fans, it felt like the reunion they'd been waiting for. But behind the scenes, it wasn't quite that simple. Sheen revealed that Cryer wasn't someone he personally reached out to. Not because of lingering resentment, but because, according to Sheen, he didn't even have the right number for him. Instead, it was the documentary's director who made the call. When Sheen finally saw what Cryer had said on camera, he admitted he was moved. He even sent a message of thanks, telling his former co-star he was sorry they hadn't connected directly. But the reply, it never came. That unanswered message became its own headline. Sheen says he reached out after watching Jon Cryer's documentary interview, thanking him for his honesty and compassion, and even apologizing for not contacting him personally. But this silence on the other end spoke volumes. Sheen insists it wasn't intentional, that he probably just texted the wrong number. In his words, it's not like Jon did not respond. He's super responsible like that. Still, fans couldn't help but notice the symbolism. Sheen has mended fences with people he once publicly humiliated. He's made peace with Chuck Lorre, the very man he once called a stupid little man. Even Sharinga cameo in his series Bookie, and a wink to their turbulent past. What once seemed impossible suddenly became reality. Sheen and Lorre standing side by side again. So why can Sheen make peace with the showrunner he once insulted on national TV, but not with Jon Cryer, the co-star who carried half the show with him? That's the question fans keep asking, and the one Sheen himself can't fully answer. Sheen insists he's not the same man who imploded on live television more than a decade ago. He's now 8 years sober, a milestone he mentions with the kind of humility that was missing during his infamous Tiger Blood days. In interviews, Sheen admits he understands exactly why Jon Cryer has struggled to forgive him. He knows the chaos didn't just damage his own career. It spilled onto everyone around him, including Cryer's family. This new version of Sheen is different. He doesn't dodge blame or laugh it off anymore. Instead, he acknowledges the wreckage and talks about rebuilding. Not the fame, not the money, but his personal relationships and sense of self. The memoir and the Netflix series aren't about glorifying the scandal. They're about finally confronting it. For a man who thrived on headlines and shock value, this quieter, reflective approach feels almost unrecognizable. It's the story of someone who wants redemption, not through another role, but through honesty. The only question now is whether the people he hurt most are willing to accept it. With a memoir about to hit shelves and a Netflix documentary set to reignite old memories, Charlie Sheen is stepping back into the spotlight on his own terms. But the one storyline fans can't stop talking about isn't in the script. It's the silence between him and Jon Cryer. Will the doc open a door for reconciliation? Or will it serve as the final word on a partnership that wants to find TV comedy? Speculation is already swirling online. Some fans believe Cryer might soften after seeing Sheen's honesty on camera. Others think too much damage has been done. That the bond between these two men will remain frozen in the past. After all, Cryer has rebuilt his career, written his own memoir, and doesn't seem eager to revisit the scars of that chaotic era. For Sheen, the future looks cautiously brighter. Sobriety, self-awareness, and even peace with Chuck Lorre suggests he's capable of change. But whether Jon Cryer ever picks up the phone, that's the question only time can answer. Until then, the brothers who once made America laugh remain strangers in real life. Charlie Sheen has made peace with his demons, his sobriety, and even with Beam, and he once swore he violently hated. But the one relationship audiences still cling to, the brotherhood that made 2.5 Men legendary, remains unresolved. Jon Cryer has chosen silence, and maybe that silence says more than words ever could. Hollywood loves a comeback story, but sometimes the endings aren't tied up with the nice bow. Sometimes the wounds linger, the calls go unanswered, and the laughter on screen is the closest thing to closure we'll ever get. So the question remains, if Charlie Sheen can rewrite his own story, can he ever rewrite his ending with Jon Cryer? Or is this one Hollywood friendship destined to stay broken forever?